Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jamal Abbott. Excited to share this information with you about how to develop your communication superpowers. This sounds super impressive, and because it is, we all have gifts, we all have abilities, and we just don't realize what we have. But tonight, you're going to learn a little bit more about this and why it's important to develop this. All right, there's a question that I have for the audience here today. Raise your hand if you ever watch Saturday morning cartoons growing up as a child. Raise them high, raise them high. Come on now, don't be afraid. This is a safe place. All right, perfect. So do me a favor, let's put this down here in the chat. Let me know what cartoon you actually watch on Saturday mornings. I'd be very, very interested to hear what you actually watched as a child. So take a moment, drop that in the chat and let me know what you watched. Okay, Bugs Bunny, Yu-Gi-Oh, Tom and Jerry, Static Shock, The Flintstones, that's a good one. That's a classic. He-Man, I remember He-Man, perfect. The Justice League, okay, perfect. All good responses and all good shows. So I want to do a quick thing and then just share what I grew up watching when I was a child. And that was the X-Men. That was my favorite show, like, of all time. So the X-Men, we had Wolverine and Gambit and Storm and Magneto, all sorts of characters. And these were just like ordinary like people. These were superheroes. They were mutants. They had this mutated gene that gave them special abilities. So with Wolverine, he had some pretty cool abilities to be able to heal. Cyclops, the guy that's shooting the laser from his eyes, he had to control his powers with his eyes because he would take things out just by looking at them. And then Beast was a person that was super intelligent, but was a furry beast. So all sorts of unique characters here in this show. And it's one of my favorite cartoons growing up and watching on Saturday mornings. The funny thing about this too, when I was developing this speech, my son was telling me, Dad, nobody watches Saturday morning cartoons. Well, it's like, well, yeah, we didn't grow up in this whole era where we're streaming like crazy. So it's funny that he was mentioning that, but yeah, there was a point in time where we actually had to wait for Saturday morning to watch all the cartoons that we can watch. So it's a completely different time. So with the X-Men, we had one leader in particular who was the founder of the X-Men, who was Professor Xavier. So what I liked about Professor Xavier was that he was very calm, very cool and collected, and he gave the X-Men a place to be able to control their powers. So with Cyclops or even with Wolverine, instead of trying to figure this out on the go, they had an opportunity to practice and to hone in their superhero powers and then use them responsibly by training in an environment that wouldn't put other people in danger. So because of that, that's the reason why I love Professor Xavier. He's a man of lots of wisdom and was definitely needed for the X-Men, because without him, they would be lost in trying to figure out how to control and how to use their powers responsibly. So with me growing up, I wondered, what is my superpower? I'm looking at the X-Men and I was really intrigued with the idea of like accidentally stumbling into superpower. So I was wondering like, okay, like, is there a spider that's gonna like crawl on my bed and then bite me? And then I would have like, you know, powers that allow me to climb on the wall or to shoot the webs at the bad guys. Like I was really wondering if that would actually happen to me. And then to take it a step further, I was really pumped up when I would watch the X-Men, and then I would act out with my brother some of the different moves that we saw. So I would like to be like Wolverine and then pretend that I knew karate. And then my brother was always the bad guy and I would always beat him up. And the cool thing about it too was that we got to change the episode as we saw fit using our imagination. So I found myself looking at X-Men as a way to escape and then, you know, use those powers that I saw on TV and then have those play out in my mind. So I still wonder to this day, what are my superpowers? How can I help this world become a better place with the skills and abilities that God has given me? So that's my question for myself. And then maybe even for you. The one thing that we have to consider too about superheroes, there are superheroes that are out there that want to do good things for the world. They want to protect the world. They want to preserve the world. They want to make sure that this world is a better place for other people to enjoy. Then you have other superheroes. They're actually the bad guys. They want to take over the world. They want to control the world's resources. They want to use these powers and these skills that they have that are far superior than any other person out there, and then use them in an irresponsible way. So there's always a fight between good and evil. And that's the reason why I love superheroes. We have to figure out how the good guys are going to take over the bad guys and then allow good to prevail in the end. So another thing to consider here too is that these concepts that I'm talking about with superpowers, with abilities, and then using them responsibly, this all applies to us in the real world. So one quote that I love from Spider-Man is that with great with great power comes great responsibility. And that comes from Peter Parker's uncle, who talked about the importance of using your gifts responsibly. So we all have this gift that we need to use responsibly. And what exactly am I talking about with this gift? I'm talking about our gift of communication. Some people like to call it the gift of gab. At least that's what my mom likes to say. But communication is a gift that we have from God. And it's amazing that God has given us the ability to communicate in so many different ways, especially considering today how we can communicate either verbally, communicate, through text messaging, or, just communicate in other different ways and fashions. So we have all been given this ability to communicate, but sometimes communication can get a little scary depending upon who's using this tool to communicate. If you're paying attention at all to elections, and then if you looked into your mailbox, maybe you looked into social media, or maybe you're talking among your peers and friends, and then there's all sorts of conversations that are happening right now about how one candidate may be better compared to another, or another candidate maybe did some things that were wrong in the past, while another candidate is like a perfectly good angel. So that's an example of communication, but it could be used to kind of skew the opinions and beliefs of other individuals. So something to think about there. With communication, I think about this verse that comes from the Bible, and I'll paraphrase this just a little bit. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And so just really think about that. On one hand, with the same mouth, with the same tongue, we have the ability to give life to somebody by speaking a word of encouragement, by telling somebody, hey, you did a good job. Hey, you know what? I see you're having a bad day. You'll be fine. You'll get through this. I'm here for you if you need me. And then you have the other form of that where you could literally be speaking death over somebody's life, where maybe you're berating them, maybe you're giving them a hard time without really giving them a good reason for it. So we have to be careful about how we use this power. So once again, this is a gift. This is superhuman abilities that we're given by God, and we want to make sure that we're using it responsibly. So as you're looking at this slide, tell me what you'd rather be doing with your tongue. Do you want to give death over to somebody and have them shrink down to where they're feeling like they're not important? Or do you want to speak life to that individual where they're feeling good about themselves, where they're feeling positive about how they are and what their role is in this life and then in their place in Las Vegas? Now I'm gonna take it back here to the X-Men real quick. So we have on our left, the Xavier Institute of Higher Learning. So this is the place that the X-Men went to, and then other students of Professor Xavier, where they learn how to use their gifts in a responsible way. And then there's some parallels with this place and with this other place here called Southern Hills Toastmasters, which is at Southern Hills Baptist Church. So if you've never seen this before, this is the outside of Southern Hills Baptist Church, and this is the place where the magic happens. This is where we get encouragement. This is where we're able to share our faith, receive instruction and correction, and then be able to develop and then enhance the skills, the abilities, and the gifts that God has given us for his glory. So with that being said, I want to transition now to a couple of ideas that you may want to consider when it comes to understanding the gift that you have, this superhero capability that we have called communication. So by the end of this speech, you're going to learn about how or who's going to be able to develop these communication powers. And then you'll also learn why, like, why do you really want to develop these skills? And then finally, you'll learn how to develop this power and then give this as a benefit to all who come across you. When I thought about communicating and when I thought about what I saw other people were doing on a regular basis, I really thought deep down inside that you had to be born with this ability to speak, with this ability to communicate like eloquently. I really thought that you had to be born with this ability. And the other thing that I also kept in the back of my mind too was that I personally grew up with some speech issues. So probably somewhere around the age of 3 or 5 years old, I had problems with speaking. I had problems with stuttering, and it really gave me a lot of self-confidence issues. And if I was around a group of other individuals that spoke well, I pretty much kind of kept to myself because I didn't want anybody else to hear me take a long time to get a thought out. So I thought, okay, I won't be able to ever speak to their ability because that was something I wasn't born with, and I'll just have to deal with these issues. Even though I went to speech therapy and then saw the people to help me with my speech, I didn't think this was something that I'd be able to beat. But that was a limiting belief. And then the reality is that anybody can develop this communication superpower. It really takes a lot of practice and effort to really see the fruits of your labor. And then the other thing to consider too, when it comes to communicating in public, communicating with your peers and or communicating in a small group, there's never going to be a moment where you're actually going to be perfect in your speech. And then actually it's practice it's not practice that makes perfect. It's practice that makes progress that allows you to really develop this superhuman capability that you've been gifted with. Why develop your communication powers? The one thing that sticks out to me was this little quote that I've heard from a while ago about your gifts being able to make room for you. Sunshine talked about this a little bit in her speech, how she wanted to develop her skills in Toastmasters so that way she could get to the next level in her career. And we all have some form of aspiration when it comes to wanting to get to the next level when it comes to different aspects of our lives. And I can promise you, after being in Toastmasters for a couple of years now, your gifts will definitely make room for you if you give yourself an opportunity to really practice and then really focus on this area in communication. Another thing to keep in mind too is that 75% of the population, they're actually afraid of speaking in public. So if you consider 4 people in a room, 3 of those 4 people are going to be terrified in speaking in public. So you have to ask yourself this question: do you really want to be a part of the majority where you're afraid to speak in public, where you're afraid to express your thoughts, your feelings and emotions? Or do you want to be a part of the minority that says, you know what? Yes, I'm afraid of speaking in public. Of course, who's not going to be afraid of that? but I'm gonna do something about it. I'm going to develop this skill. I'm gonna develop this ability and give myself an opportunity to actually overcome this fear of public speaking. And then if you overcome that fear, if you really overcome that challenge that may be nugging inside of you right now, you don't know what's on the other side of that opportunity. Like, you don't understand that somebody is waiting to hear your voice, somebody that needs the gifts that you have, the powers that you possess. But this is all part of the process. This is all part of the plan. You have to get over this fear in order to help somebody else who can benefit from your experience. Okay, so you've heard me give you a lot of motivation, some inspiration about why we want to develop this communication power that lies within you. Now it's time to understand how to practically put this into use. So once again, we talked about Southern Hills Toastmasters being similar to the X-Men in that this is a training ground to where you can practice your skills, your abilities, practice those superpowers. So use this environment, use this as a training ground to find your voice. You guys are going to get tired of me talking about this after after this presidency is over, but I honestly believe that this is the best place to find your voice, to find your rhythm, to find your cadence. When you have to speak in public, it's too late. You can't practice like that. And it's probably not good for the people that have to actually hear the message that you have to deliver and then act upon that message. So why not give yourself a chance to practice and sharpen up on those skills by using this training ground in Southern Hills Toastmasters or in Toastmasters International? Feedback is a gift. So I remember I heard this one time long ago, and I thought this was a great way of looking at feedback. If you're not getting feedback, how can you grow your superhuman communication powers? It's kind of difficult to grow in a vacuum and maybe try to figure this out on your own. And it's not to say that you can't do it, but it might take just a little bit longer to figure this out with trial and error. But as you saw with the evaluation that we just heard from Sunshine, and then even watching somebody like Rachel grow and Sunshine grow through this process, they're going to get feedback. They're going to get an opportunity to learn from the experiences that they're putting forward. And then that feedback that they're going to get is a gift that's going to help them grow in the long term. So feedback is a gift. So if you're getting feedback, take that as an opportunity to tell that person, thank you for the feedback. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And then this is something that I can use to get better with. And then lastly, you don't want to rely on just one superpower. So as cool as it is to, maybe be able to climb up the walls or maybe use your mind to read people's minds, you might want to have another couple skills to complement your superhero powers. So don't rely just on one super move. Go ahead and develop those other skills. So maybe you want to get in the mindset of giving better evaluations. That's a good skill to sharpen up. Maybe you want to get in the mindset of listening. That's definitely a good skill to sharpen up as you're developing your superpower skills. So the point is that you want to have some complementary skills to go along with your main gift that you've been given. So just to recap, we talked about who's able to develop some communication superpowers. And we know that it's not just limited to one person, but this is available to us all. We also talked about why you would want to develop your superhero communication powers. And then finally, we talked about some tactical skills and then steps to use those powers so that all can benefit. So I just want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening to how you can better improve your superhero skills. And at this time, I'd like to turn this back over to Ms. Rachel Lee. Take it away.